Order. We come now to the 10-minute rule motion. Patricia Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to enable the Information Commissioner's Office to take action against company directors for breaches of the Privacy and Electronic Communications EC Directors Regulations 2003 relating to unsolicited marketing communications made by a company and for connected purposes. Since I was elected last year, I have been campaigning to tackle the scourge of nuisance calls which blight the lives of far too many of our constituents across the United Kingdom. I can vouch for the fact that this is a huge problem faced by far too many of my constituents in North Ayrshire and Arran, and I know there's a similar picture across Scotland and across the United Kingdom. It is time that named company directors of those companies who are responsible for nuisance calls are held to account, instead of fines for breaches in the law being imposed on companies which then close down and are simply reopened under a different name, thus allowing fines for breaches in the law to go unpaid. Being bombarded with nuisance calls and texts is not only an annoying interruption to people's lives, it can be deeply distressing to the hundreds of thousands who endure them on a daily basis. They are a blight on the lives of too many members of our communities and are particularly upsetting for those who are vulnerable. Research from Which last year found that 74%, 3/4 of people with a landline, and 58%, 6 out of 10 people with a mobile phone, have reported a nuisance call. In addition, 6 out of 10 people have indicated that cold calls have actively discouraged them from picking up their landline when it rings. While most of us, 80%, say we find cold calls annoying, 1/3 of people receiving such calls admit to feeling intimidated by them, and around 1/3 of people screen their calls to minimise unsolicited calls on their landlines. Beyond this, other things are worth remembering. 32% of people who receive a nuisance call receive more than 10 calls over 4 weeks, and 12% of people receive more than 20 calls over 4 weeks. 35% of these calls are marketing calls. All of us are forced to simply tolerate the appalling nuisance of aggressive and persistent marketing calls. However, Ofcom has found disturbingly that people aged over 55 and those who are unemployed tend to receive a higher number than any other group of people. There has been a clear trend showing a marked increase in the number of calls received by the over 55s. Now, many of us can choose to simply ignore calls if we suspect a nuisance call is being made to us. But consider if you are elderly, frail and dependent on your landline. You either answer your phone when it rings so as not to miss a call from relatives phoning to check that all is well, or you may ignore your phone when it rings to avoid nuisance calls. If you don't answer your phone, immediately your relatives may think that something's happened to you, perhaps that you've had a fall. So you need to answer your phone. However, the cost of doing so is having to tolerate numerous nuisance calls each day. People are being harassed and subject to real annoyance, which creates anxiety and distress every day, several times a day, and it's simply not good enough. There are those who advise that if we are plagued by nuisance calls, to install a call blocker. However, these don't come as standard on all phones, and in any case, if you have to buy a call blocker, you have to go to the expense, the cheapest being around £40. Why should consumers be driven to this expense? Why is the onus and the responsibility on the consumer and not the company causing distress? I'm aware that the UK Government has taken measures to tackle this scourge by insisting on caller ID, and this is a step forward, but it deals with the symptoms and not the root cause. And I also understand that in April last year, the Information Commissioner was given the power the need for the information to prove that a company making unsolicited marketing calls had caused distress. And again, this is a step forward, but more needs to be done. And I understand that the Department of Culture, Media and Sport has made supportive noises around the change in the law that I am proposing, and I hope that those positive noises prove true. The Scottish Government is also using what limited powers it has under consumer protection, but much more needs to be done. Companies that unlawfully make unsolicited marketing communications by phone or text can be fined by the regulator, the Information Commissioner's Office, if it's found they've not complied with the rules on the use of consumers' personal data. However, enforcement action is taken against the company rather than named company directors. And this means that too many companies do not treat compliance with the law around marketing communications as a board-level issue. Too many rogue directors avoid paying fines by closing one company and starting up another with a new name, known as phoenixing, and continuing their activity. And that is why only 4 out of 22 such fines imposed have been paid in full, according to Which. This bill would make senior company executives accountable if their company failed to comply with the rules on unsolicited communications, and hold directors to account where the company does not pay the fine, even if the company phoenixes. Under the Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulations, the Information Commissioner can currently only take action against a company rather than a named individual, where marketing communications are made on behalf of a corporation. If we hold culpable senior executives at board level accountable for the company's practices, those individuals would need to ensure that the company's practices were in line with the law or face personal action, which could lead to disqualification as a company director in some cases. The enforcement regime under the Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulation is an extension of the enforcement regime under the Data Protection Act. The Data Protection Act already includes a rule that allows individual company officers to be held accountable for certain breaches of the Data Protection Act. However, this rule does not currently extend to breaches of the Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulation. This bill would allow the Information Commissioner Office to take action against company directors, not only for breaches of the data protection, but also for breaches in the Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulations. This means that the Information Commissioner's Office could take action directly against directors where they allow their company to commit breaches or fail to pay fines, and where the director is convicted of a criminal offence that could be subject to disqualification. And this, Mr. Speaker, would help to tackle the root cause of this blight on our citizens' lives in their very own homes. Technological advances mean that those who make nuisance calls can churn out automated calls at the rate of millions each day. This bill would improve the life for all of us, and I believe it will be welcomed by legitimate businesses who face a real crisis in consumer confidence, as rogue businesses undermine the entire relationship between legitimate business and consumers. There is a huge amount of support for the alterations to the law this bill would make, with 79% of those surveyed agreeing that the directors of companies should be held personally accountable if their company makes these calls without the necessary permission. And this bill, importantly, would not incur any additional cost for the taxpayer, as no additional government funding to implement or enforce it would be needed. Given the scale of the problem of nuisance calls, and given this bill's attempts to tackle the problem at source instead of tackling the symptoms, I commend it to the House.
Order. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as I have that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Kirsten Oswald, Dr Lisa Cameron, Roger Mullen, John Nicholson, Anne McLaughlin, Joanna Cherry, Corey Wilson, Alan Brown, Jonathan Edwards, Liz Saville-Roberts, Hyle Williams and myself, sir.
Patricia, you have to go and present it now.
Patricia Gibson.
Unsolicited Marketing Communications Company Directors Bill.
Second reading what day?
18th of November, Mr. Speaker.
18th of November 2016. Thank you.